California's Gold is produced in association with KCET Los Angeles and is seen statewide on California Public Television. This series is endorsed by the California Teachers Association, the California School Boards Association, and the California Library Association. Well, hello everybody, I'm Hewell Hauser, and here we are on this absolutely beautiful morning in Northern California in Solano County in the nice little, very historic town of Benicia. Dana, you're going to let us know exactly where we are standing because this is one of the most historic and obscure places in all of California. What is this building right here?
This is the third state capital of California.
The third state capital of California, and it served as the capital from
February of 1853 to late February of 1854, only for about 13 months.
So the whole government was run from here? There was the assembly met here, and this was where the laws were made? And
Exactly.
do most Californians, do you think most of us know this?
I don't think so, and the people that do know about it think that Benicia was the first state capital and it was actually the third.
All right, so there's a lot of history in Benicia.
Absolutely.
And this is now a state historic park. It's
Right.
open for the public, for all of us to come and enjoy.
Absolutely.
It is obscure, it is wonderful. It's our third state capital here in Benicia, but we have come to Benicia in search of something else. I hate to tell you that, as nice as this place is. We have come to Benicia in search of another bit of obscure but very important California history. We've heard that it's just down the street about a mile or two, and that's where we're heading. We're here in Benicia looking for California's gold. Okay, our adventure begins, and our tour guides are Tom and Bill Rubarth. And fellas, before we start this adventure, let's kind of set the stage. Where are we now as far as this body of water is concerned?
This is the Carquinez Strait, which is northeast of San Francisco, about halfway between San Francisco and Sacramento, and it connects San Pablo Bay with Suisun Bay and the confluence of the Sacramento and the San Joaquin rivers.
All right, that set it up just perfectly. And when we look out here at this water, before we explain why the water is important, let's talk about the railroads in California for just a minute. And trust me, this is all going to make sense in just a moment. Let's talk about why this water is important to the railroad story in California.
Well, the railroads came through Sacramento, and of course the main goal of the transcontinental railway was to go to San Francisco. And they couldn't get to San Francisco because of this waterway. It was difficult to cross. The only alternative was to head way south to Altamont Pass and Niles Canyon, and then you're on the wrong side of the water to get to San Francisco.
So in the early days, the railroads were having a hard time getting into San Francisco and to Oakland because of all of this water. It was hard to build railroad bridges, wasn't it?
Yes, well, they couldn't build a low water bridge like a trestle because they had sailing ships, and this has an 8-mile-an-hour bidirectional current and an 8-foot tide. And so to run a sailing ship, try to get it through a trestle-type bridge would be very difficult.
And so they would have had to build a big bridge, and that would have taken a lot of engineering and a lot of time and a lot of money.
Not only that, but they didn't have the steel. The hardened steel wasn't really invented until the mid-20s, and that's what made the bridge possible.
All right, and when we talk, and one of the reasons why we're talking about railroads here at the beginning is because in the early days of California especially, railroads were critical to what California was all about.
There were no highways. Everybody traveled by train.
Yeah, and it was not only people, but it was goods and
everything.
Stuff going in and out of California.
Right.
All right, now we've set all this up. Now we're going to get in. We've set the stage by saying that it was difficult to build bridges for the important railroads, especially up in this part of California. We know how important railroads were. So what was the solution to not having a bridge here?
Well, the Central Pacific solved it by putting Arthur Brown in charge of building a train ferry.
Hey, wait a minute. A train ferry?
It was considered the largest train ferry in the world, and it would carry complete trains, multiple trains, across this strait, run day and night, 24 hours a day, to provide the trains getting to Oakland so that people could go to San Francisco.
So this was the shortest way to get from here to there.
Yes.
Otherwise, they would have had to have gone how many miles around to get over there?
About 60 miles further to go through Altamont Pass, and they'd had put double engines to pull it over the mountains, and they still had to go through Niles Canyon, whereas this is mostly a level water route track, and it's almost a straight line from Sacramento to Richmond, and then around the curve down to Berkeley and on to Oakland.
All right, now let's look down this way. The train would have been coming right down here to the end of this pier. And where was this train? There's the train station, the old train station down there. Where would this train be coming to from down here to here?
Well, it would come from Sacramento, and it would come to the railroad station, and then on to the dock, and on to the ferry boat, complete with the steam engines and everything.
Now, where was the ferry boat? Just pulled right up to the end of this, what was this big pier here?
Yes, this pier extended further out, and the boat would come in here, and it would go over to a town called Port Costa, which you can see over there in the background.
Are these original pilings from that?
Yes, they are.
Wow. So they have survived all of these years.
Yeah.
And when you think about traveling across here, that was a very short trip. How long are we talking about?
We're talking about a mile. It was a mile over, about a 15-minute, actually maybe a little less. It might have been closer to 10 minutes travel.
They really had it down. They had it scheduled so the first train would come on, the second train would come on afterwards, and it was a drive-on, drive-off train ferry, so that the trains came on, went to the other side, and the trains drove off.
Now, we have wonderful old photographs that you all have provided us of this train ferry. It was a big boat, wasn't it?
It was huge. It was 424 feet long. As my brother pointed out, it's about 1 1/3 football fields long, so you can get some idea.
Now, how many train cars are we talking about that would be on that boat at one time?
Well, the maximum, it depends on the length of the cars, of course, but as time went on, the cars got heavier and bigger and longer. So it's about 14 cars and 2 locomotives plus the switcher.
Now, was that about what if the Transcontinental had 18 cars? That means it'd have to make 2 trips back and forth.
No, it never did that. They made sure they had the right number of cars to go on it. If they needed another train, they would run one maybe a half hour later.
I got you. So the train dictated its own length, knowing that it had to get the whole train on the train ferry.
The trains were staged specifically for the ferry. The freights were also. The freights were lined up so that there were 4 switchers waiting for that boat to come in. As soon as the transcontinental trains were off, the freight trains pushed 4 at a time onto that boat, and the boat was gone to the other side. They were making 36 to 46 trips every 24 hours.
Wait a minute. 36 to 46 trips back and forth, right up, back, right here.
Right here.
Every 24 hours.
Every 24 hours. And that was in 1905. And they were that spaces out at about 32 minutes to 40 minutes average over a 24-hour period.
So this was a bustling place.
Oh, extremely, extremely.
Wow, this is so interesting. When did all this start?
It all started in 1879 when they built the boat.
Okay, so 1879, from the very opening day, it was probably busy.
Oh, yeah.
And it just kept getting busier and busier and busier.
Yeah, and the trains got bigger, so in 1905 they had to take the boat and make it a little stronger, and they redid it to handle the larger trains. And then by 1914 they decided they needed a second ship, so they entered on the Contra Costa.
So at one time there were 2 train ferries going back and forth, 40, 50 times a day, filled with trains.
Not only filled with trains, it was, there were 31 scheduled passenger trains, not including the freights, carried by those 2 boats every day.
That is amazing.
And the Solano sailed until with the Contra Costa until 1930, and that's just an amazing record. 51 years the Solano crossed these straits.
All right, we've talked about 51 years of history, and now let's walk right over here and look at the culprit right over here that stopped all of that. Actually, it's not a culprit, it's progress in a way. What are we looking at right down here?
Well, beneath the highway bridge there, you can see a train bridge. That bridge was built, started in 1928, finished in 1930. When it was built, it was the highest, heaviest, longest bridge west of the Mississippi.
Railroad bridge.
Any bridge.
Really? Well, it makes sense it would hold those records because it was replacing the largest train ferry in the world.
And the busiest train ferries in the world, we think.
All right, so when the bridge opened in 1930, what happened to the good old Solano?
Well, they had a big celebration. They retired the Contra Costa immediately, and the last sailing was on the Solano, and they brought up the trains from Port Costa, and the people gathered on there. I'm guessing there must have been about 2,000 people on that boat.
I've seen a picture, this wonderful picture of everybody crowded onto the end of the boat.
The Solano was very well loved. She was a wonderful ship. She was the symbol of Benicia. The crews lived in Benicia. There were 35 people that were associated with the boat that lived here. They had their families here.
So this was, you say it was a celebration, but in a way it was very sad, wasn't it?
I guess so. I wasn't there.
Well, Bill wasn't there, but this guy was there. Your name is?
Harry Wassman.
Okay, and you are a native of Benicia. You have lived here all of your life.
In the same house.
Okay, and you actually rode on the Solano, this wonderful old train ferry. Tell us about it.
That's true. Well, I would have been about 7 or 8 years old, and our destination usually was San Francisco with my parents, my brother and myself and my parents. We'd buy a ticket at the depot, get aboard the train, and then eventually, with the time, we'd move on and get onto the ferry boat.
Now, what was it like to be on the ferry boat, although you had been seeing this boat all your life because you lived in town?
That's true. But never did it appear small to us. It was always a very large ship and was doing great service in our minds.
Well, what was it like on board? What did it feel like?
Well, it was great. You get off of the rail car and traverse the deck for a brief while, because it took only about 10 and 12 minutes to get across. There was a little concession aboard, and you could get refreshments there. And so that was always a treat to my brother and I.
Well, was it considered an adventure? Because you were just going, what is that? That's not even a mile across there.
No, it's very brief time, you know. But I would say, yes, an adventure. We didn't do it so often. And it was a joy, something exciting to us.
It's very poignant to see the train today going across the water there by these old pilings that remain from the old pier where the Solano docked. Was it a sad day, that last day?
I'm sure there was mixed emotions. We all had to admit that the bridge was a great thing, but we were sorry to see the boat leave us, the ship leave us. And it did mean employment changes for the people who did. There were many people who worked on the railroad here, and so they were going to have to leave town, find new jobs. But when we considered the bridge and the advantages of the bridge, we had to acknowledge, yes, it is advancement.
Well, it was the end of an era, wasn't it?
Yes, it really was the end of an era.
Well, these days, the only boats plying through these waters are pleasure craft like we're looking at now, or big tankers and freighters. And in most instances, this would be the end of our story. We've looked at all the old pictures, we've heard the old stories, we've seen the old pilings coming out of the water. But we have a surprise, because there is another chapter, a hidden chapter, a very obscure part of this story that we have managed to uncover. And that's where our adventure is going to take us next. How far away is it we're going to be going?
It's about 25 miles.
We're going about 25 miles from here, from this historic spot, for our secret. You'd call it a surprise, wouldn't you?
It was a surprise to us.
It's a surprise. Okay, our adventure continues. We have now come about 30 miles from Benicia. We're in the San Joaquin River right now here in Antioch. And fellas, this is where it gets fun for me. As a historian, especially loving California history, it doesn't get any better or more obscure than this. Let's go back to 1930 when the Solano was, I guess the term was decommissioned. She made her last run carrying trains.
Yes, she made her last run into Benicia, and shortly afterwards, we think she was decommissioned within a few months or a year. She had almost been decommissioned beforehand. Several years before, she had a big sag in herself, in her deck, and they had almost closed down the ferry, but they had to keep her going until the bridge was complete.
So she was kind of running out of steam there, literally toward the end.
She was limping near the end, yes.
Okay, so she made her last run. The last train went off of her, and then what happened? Did they just strip her down?
Yes, they took out all of her metal, all her paddle wheels, her boilers, stripped her down. She still had her cabins, and then they towed her out.
They towed her out, and they were going to use her as what? She never really did have a very exciting use. She wasn't going to be turned into a floating restaurant or a floating hotel or a casino or a museum or anything.
They scuttled her. They scuttled her to make a breakwater for a marina.
Okay, she was used as a breakwater, and that happened right around 1931, just right after she went out of commission.
We believe so, yes.
All right, that was 1931. That was 75 years ago. And 75 years later, after all of this history we've been talking about, look what we have found right over here. Sitting right over here on the side of the river, there is the old Solano train ferry sitting, well, it's actually way down deep in the water. This is amazing, fellas. Tell us what we're looking at here.
Well, it looks like we're looking at an island, but what we're looking at is what's left of the Solano. This is her hull. You can see her two walking beam A-frame engines. One is tipped over. The other one is still standing straight. You see all the rebar. You can almost guess where the deck was, which is far above the wood that you see right now.
Is this original wood over here from the deck or from the...
Yes, it is. I can't really tell you what piece that is because this ferry had been badly burned at one point.
What do you mean badly burned?
Well, in 1983, we were told that on July 4th, 1983, somebody was shooting fireworks, and one of the fireworks caught this boat on fire. At that time, she still had her A-frames up, and she had her deck was rotting, but still pretty much there. She did not have cabins at the time. The fireworks caught her on fire, and she burned to the water line.
Wow, in 1983?
In 83.
So until then, you could still look at this and tell it was a something.
Exactly.
I'm trying to figure out what we're looking at. What is this big pole that looks like it's just kind of fallen over?
That's the pole that's in front of the pilot house that you see in the photographs. And you can see the rods going down to the deck when it was upright.
So these rods that are coming off the top, and this would have been going down to the deck. So how high up would this boat have been from the surface when she was running full speed?
The deck was probably about 15 feet above the water line, and the pilot house was another 40 feet higher than that.
So we're talking about 55 feet high, and the boat was over a football field and a third long.
Yes, he was large.
So it was a huge ferry boat.
Largest in the world, and it's still, we have not found a larger train ferry.
Now, the fellow who was nice enough to bring us out here on the boat, your name, sir, is?
Steve.
Okay, you're a local
River rat.
river rat here.
Yeah.
You've lived in this area all of your life.
That's
Do
correct.
most of the locals out here, especially even the ones who are out here on the river all the time in boats, do they know what this is?
Nobody has a clue. I launch here at this ramp right next door probably 50 or 75 times a year, and I never knew what this was.
You had never known. What
No.
did you think it was?
I thought it was an island. That's what I thought.
With all of this,
With the trees and everything. I mean, you know, there's a lot of wrecks and things out here, but when I went online and actually saw the pictures of it and everything, and you look at the A-frames and stuff, it was just, you know, and came back again and looked at it, I was like, oh my gosh. I mean, it's really quite something.
now here's a whole, this is a lot of material right up in here.
Yeah, this is the A-frame tipped over, the second A-frame for the second engine. And you can see a bit of the truss work. And if you look at the water line, you can see the watertight compartments. You see that crisscrossing of wood?
Down at the water line.
Right at the water line, yes. She had 11 watertight compartments, so if she hit something, she wouldn't sink long before the Titanic had them.
Wow, and what is this? This looks like a side of the ship over here.
That's the far side of the hull that's been twisted over. And you can see the double-sided hull there, the inside and the outside of the hull.
Wow.
And you can see the reinforcing rods coming up and down, and you can see the poles. The poles are what held the boat together, and these big rods that connected the whole boat. And then this pole here in front kept the front end of the boat from sagging, and that's why that rod comes down there to the hull.
Boy, you know, you can really, if you didn't know what you were looking at, though, this would be really kind of obscure.
Very.
I mean, I can understand now why the locals didn't really understand the significance of what this was out here.
I think
You have to know what you're looking at.
you have to know what you're looking at, and fortunately we've been able to figure most of it out.
Now we're coming right around the bow?
This is the bow of the ship.
And we're looking
the deck was
straight down the ship here.
Yeah, the
now.
deck was lined up with the top of the bolts, and this is sort of the shelf where the apron shelf was, so that the apron could come down.
And the train
connect
could come on.
And the train could come on.
And
yes.
the tracks would have been just right down here.
Would have been right here, and they made a Y. They actually went around that A-frame. 2 tracks to the right, 2 tracks to the left. She had 4 tracks on her.
Boy, this is... I feel like I'm very close to something that's very, very historic. I kind of want to reach out and touch it, but I don't want to fall in. Maybe we can get back a little bit so at least I can say I've touched the old Solano. Oh, wow. A piece of history right here. Oh, wow. She's been sitting here since 1931. And look at this. You almost have to be here to feel what this feels like, but to actually be here this close to her, it's kind of like giving her the respect that she's due.
Yeah, well, she certainly is obstinate. That A-frame's still standing.
Yeah. She's not alive and well. She's alive and on life support.
Obstinate.
She refuses to die.
She won't die.
We did it. Thank you for bringing us here. And you know, this boat is a survivor. She has seen a lot of California history.
She surely has. Started in 1879. That was before the shootout at the OK Corral. She sailed for 51 years, and that was the invention of electricity, automobiles, World War I, Spanish-American War, and the list goes on. Electricity, airplanes, cars, everything has transpired. She lived up to the days of Al Capone and the Great Depression.
And you know, she was a very important part of California history too, wasn't she?
She was the main line for the Central and Southern Pacific Railroad.
Yeah.
The main line.
Well, you know, a lot of people have forgotten about her, and she's kind of stuck in the mud and disintegrating here in the mud of the San Joaquin River today. But that doesn't lessen the importance of what she was and what she did during her prime.
It was an engineering masterpiece from our point of view. We were just shocked as what Mr. Brown did back in 1879, and to have the ferry last through the changes in rail. The cars got bigger, the engines got bigger, and this ferry still stayed in service for 51 years. That's quite an achievement.
Well, it was an achievement. This wonderful old ferry that when it was built was the largest ferry in the world and remained that basically even, I guess, until today, right?
We have not found a ship larger,
So she still holds the record.
to our knowledge, yes.
Well, she's not looking too good these days, but at least she's here. That's what's important. We touched her, we came up close to her, and we've felt her good vibes. Thousands and tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands of stories, California stories connected with that old boat. People who rode on her in those train cars.
Yep.
Being here with her has been an absolutely wonderful experience. Thank you all very much. We found her, the old Solano, a fine example, even though she's growing up in weeds and trees, and she's rusting away and falling down into the mud. She's still a fine example of California's gold. Well, hello, everybody. I'm Huell Hauser, and I sure hope you enjoyed our rediscovery of the historic old Solano train ferry. If you'd like to go on this adventure again, share it with your family or friends, or perhaps donate a copy to your local school or library. It's available on video cassette and on DVD. All you have to do is call 1-800-266-5727, and we'll be glad to send it to you right away.